The Galactic Council chamber was eerily silent as the holographic display flickered to life in the center of the massive hall. Representatives from hundreds of alien species, each more advanced than the last, stared at the grainy footage with growing unease. It was a live feed from the front line, a place they had long assumed would never fall. The Zelrath had arrived. They were a race feared across the known universe. A war-driven species that consumed entire civilizations, leaving nothing but ashes in their wake. The Galactic Council had fought them before, but never won. The best they could do was delay the inevitable, sacrificing planets in the hopes of buying time. But now, Earth was in their path. A small, unassuming world on the fringes of the galaxy. It had no interstellar empire, no fleets of warships patrolling the void. By all accounts, it was primitive. The humans still fought among themselves, still relied on fragile political structures. Their technology was centuries behind even the weakest council species. Yet, something was wrong. The footage showed Zelrath warships descending through Earth's atmosphere, their spiked hulls glowing red as they prepared for planetary bombardment. And then, they stopped. No explosion, no destruction, no screams of terror. Instead, the Zelrath ships hovered in place, unmoving, the silence stretched across the battlefield, broken only by static-filled transmissions from the confused invaders. Their advance had halted in mere moments, as if some unseen force had grabbed their war machines and held them in an unbreakable grip. The Council watched as Earth's response began. Human aircraft, ancient by galactic standards, screamed through the sky in tight formations, their missiles streaking toward the immobilized Zelrath fleet. The impact was devastating. Explosions tore through the alien ships, sending debris raining down onto the cities below. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were winning. A murmur spread through the chamber. "This is impossible," hissed the Ralvex ambassador, his many eyes wide with disbelief. "Those ships have conquered worlds protected by entire armadas, and now they're being shot down by projectile-based weaponry." More footage appeared. Ground battles. Zelrath warriors, 7 feet tall, armored in bioorganic plating, equipped with energy weapons capable of melting steel, were being cut down in droves. By humans. Primitive bullets shredded through their bodies. Explosives designed for human warfare turned Zelrath fortifications into rubble. And when the fighting got too close for ranged weapons, the humans tore them apart with their bare hands. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some council members whispered that the footage had to be faked. Others demanded immediate intervention, fearing that if the Zelrath fell here, humanity would rise too far, too fast. But then came the final transmission. A battered Zelrath warlord, his face bloodied and his breathing ragged, staring into the camera. Behind him, the ruins of his once mighty fleet burned in the distance. He spoke one sentence before the signal cut out, his voice filled with something no one had ever heard from his kind before. Fear. "Do not come to Earth. It is already theirs." The Council could do nothing but tremble. Panic spread through the Galactic Council chamber like wildfire. The very idea that the Zelrath, the same species that had ground entire civilizations into dust, had been reduced to fear was unthinkable. Yet the proof was undeniable. The footage of Earth's counterattack replayed on the central screen. Again and again, the Council watched as humans tore through the Zelrath forces. Their primitive weapons should have been useless, their defenses laughable, their species easily crushed. But that wasn't what had happened. Humanity had annihilated them. The Speaker of the Council, a towering Selnari elder with shimmering blue skin and 6 piercing eyes, finally rose from his seat. His voice was slow, careful, but the undercurrent of dread could not be hidden. "We must consider what this means," he said, his mandibles clicking. "If Earth is capable of defeating the Zelrath, what does that mean for the rest of us?" The room fell silent again. For eons, the Galactic Council had believed itself to be the highest authority in the known universe. Every species within its ranks had been weighed, measured, and categorized. Those who were weak were ignored. Those who were strong were brought into the fold. Those who resisted were dealt with. Humanity had never been considered a threat. They were a Category 2 species, barely capable of interstellar travel, possessing no significant fleets, no advanced energy weapons, and no unified planetary government. A race still entangled in its own primitive conflicts. Yet despite all of that, they had just done something no species had ever managed before. They had broken the Zelrath. A reptilian delegate from the Drawl Dominion clicked his talons against the stone table, his frilled crest rising in unease. "Perhaps it was a fluke," he suggested, though his voice lacked confidence. "The Zelrath may have underestimated them. A miscalculation, nothing more." The screen shifted, displaying intercepted Zelrath transmissions, broken messages filled with desperation and confusion. Their minds. Something is wrong with their minds. They do not fight for survival. They fight for destruction. They are laughing while they kill us. The room turned deathly quiet. A heavy bipedal creature with cybernetic enhancements let out a deep, synthetic growl. "Laughter?" the Bhavanti warlord rumbled. "Why would they be enjoying this?" A soft chime rang through the chamber. A new transmission. The delegate stiffened. It was coming directly from the Sol system. The humans had never reached out to the Council before. They had barely acknowledged the greater galactic community. Until now. The image flickered to life. A human stood before them, dressed in simple military attire. His features were sharp, his eyes cold. But what unsettled the Council the most wasn't his appearance. It was the smile on his face. It wasn't the expression of a species that had barely survived an invasion. It wasn't relief. It wasn't exhaustion. It was amusement. The human spoke, his voice calm, almost casual. "You're watching, aren't you?" The Council members shifted uncomfortably. The human's smile widened. "You wanted to see what we're capable of. I hope the show didn't disappoint." A murmur rippled through the chamber. No species had ever addressed the Council in such an informal, almost mocking tone. The human continued, his eyes locking onto the screen as if he could see each of them directly. "We know who you are. We've known for a while now. You like to sit in your little towers, playing judge over the galaxy, deciding who gets to thrive and who gets to die." His expression darkened, the smile fading. "You thought Earth was weak. You thought we were primitive." He leaned in slightly, and the transmission flickered with static. "You have no idea what we are." He gestured behind him, and the screen shifted to a live feed of Earth. Not just the war-torn battlefields, but cities, factories working at full capacity, research facilities with blueprints for weapons the Council couldn't even comprehend. Humans preparing. For centuries, we fought each other. We wiped out entire civilizations before we even left our own planet. Do you think an alien invasion was going to break us? He chuckled, shaking his head. You just gave us a reason to unite. A low hum of alarm spread through the chamber. The human leaned back, arms crossed. So here's how this is going to go, he said. Earth doesn't need your help. We don't need your approval. And we sure as hell don't need your rules. He let that sink in before delivering the final blow. You just watched us end the Zelrath. He tilted his head. Tell me, what do you think we'll do if someone else comes knocking? The transmission cut. For the first time in history, the Galactic Council knew what fear felt like. The Galactic Council chamber remained frozen in stunned silence long after the transmission ended. No one dared to speak. No one dared to move. The weight of what they had just witnessed pressed down on them like an unforgiving force. The Zelrath had been the galaxy's executioners, the enforcers of extinction. For eons, civilizations had trembled at their name. The Council had spent centuries debating ways to contain them, slow them, but no species had ever succeeded in stopping them. Until now. A primitive world, no, a human world, had crushed them utterly, and they hadn't just fought back, they had laughed while doing it. The Ralvex ambassador, still shaking, finally found his voice. We cannot let this stand," he stammered. "If humans have truly destroyed the Zelrath, then that means they are now the dominant force in the galaxy, and that is unacceptable." A low murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Council had been at the top for millennia. They dictated the rules, they controlled the balance of power. The thought of a species outside their grasp rising to such dominance was terrifying. The Droll Dominion's ambassador, his golden eyes narrowed, tapped a clawed finger against the table. "We must consider containment," he said, "a preemptive strike before they become a greater threat." Another species, the insectoid Jatil, clicked its mandibles in warning. "Contain them. Did you not hear what was just said? The humans know about us. They are already preparing. They expected this reaction." Silence fell again. That was the true horror of the situation. The humans had not just defeated the Zelrath. They had sent a message to the rest of the galaxy. They knew exactly what they were doing. The Speaker of the Council, the oldest and most powerful among them, finally exhaled a slow, measured breath. His 6 eyes gleamed with something the other delegates were too afraid to name. "They are not like us," he murmured. "Every species in this chamber rose from struggle, from hardship. But humanity? They rose from war." He gestured toward the darkened holoscreen. "We sit here, afraid of what they might become. But I ask you, what if it is already too late? What if, for all our advancements, for all our intelligence, we were always meant to be their prey?" The words sent a chill through the room. No one had ever considered that possibility, that perhaps they were not the apex species of the galaxy, that perhaps all this time the humans had simply been waiting, lurking in the dark, until the right moment to reveal themselves. The Zelrath had made a mistake. They had forced humanity to unite. They had forced humanity to evolve. Now the Galactic Council had only 2 choices: bend the knee or prepare for war. And deep down, every species in that room already knew the outcome. No one had ever survived a war against humanity, not even humanity itself. The council chamber descended into chaos. For the first time in recorded history, there was no semblance of order. Representatives of dozens of civilizations shouted over one another, some calling for diplomacy, others for war. A few whispered of retreat, of isolation, of hiding from the new apex predator that had just declared its place in the galactic food chain. But there was no hiding from humans. The Droll Dominion ambassador slammed a clawed hand against the table, his frilled crest flaring. "We strike now while they are still contained on their homeworld. We cannot allow this madness to spread." A member of the Jatil delegation, a towering, insectoid being with glistening black carapace, chittered in response. "And how do you suggest we do that? You saw the footage. The Zelrath were not merely defeated, they were eradicated. Their warships were torn from the sky. Their armies were shattered. We cannot fight what we do not understand." The Ralvex representative, still trembling from the transmission, hissed, "Then we contain them. We blockade their system, cut off all potential avenues for expansion, If they cannot leave their world, they cannot threaten us. And what happens when they find a way through? Came a soft, measured voice. The room fell silent. The speaker was an Urali, one of the oldest and wisest species in the council. Their race had never spoken in aggression, never taken part in war. Yet now, their representative sat forward, 6 luminous eyes filled with something close to fear. "You assume humans need our technology to leave their system?" the Urali said, voice calm but firm. "But have you considered the alternative?" The other delegates hesitated. "What do you mean?" the Droll ambassador asked. The Urali exhaled slowly. The Zelrath were far more advanced than humanity. Their warships were decades, if not centuries, ahead of Earth's capabilities. Their mandibles clicked. Yet humanity overcame them. They did not do so with superior firepower. They did not do so with overwhelming numbers. They did so because they are something the galaxy has never encountered before. A cold, sinking realization swept through the chamber. Humans had evolved for war. While other species had advanced beyond their primitive instincts, forming vast and peaceful civilizations, humanity had never left the battlefield behind. Even before they reached the stars, they had mastered warfare on every scale: biological, technological, psychological. They had fought wars over ideals, over resources, over mere words. They had turned violence into an art form. And now, that art had been unleashed on the galaxy. The Speaker of the Council, his 6 eyes heavy with the weight of their future, finally spoke. "There is only one course of action left to us." The entire room fell deathly still. "We must speak with them." A ripple of unease spread through the chamber. Diplomacy? With them? "You cannot be serious," the Droll ambassador spat. "After what we just witnessed, after what they just threatened, you want to sit down and talk?" The speaker's gaze darkened. "And what alternative do you propose?" he asked. "A war? Against an enemy that thrives in war? Against a species that does not surrender, does not retreat, and does not fear death?" No one had an answer. The speaker continued, his voice solemn. "The humans have already won, whether we acknowledge it or not. The Zelrath learned this too late. We will not make the same mistake." A pause. Then, the speaker gave the order that would shape the fate of the galaxy. "Send a delegation to Earth." The Terran military outpost was nothing grand. A simple structure, built from reinforced steel and concrete, resting on the outskirts of what had once been a major Zelrath invasion zone. The land still bore scars of the battle. Twisted metal, scorched earth, the husks of alien war machines. But the humans had already begun rebuilding. A small galactic council envoy stood before the entrance, their ships having been escorted to the surface by Terran aerospace fighters, an act that made it painfully clear who was truly in control. A human soldier stepped forward to greet them. He was unremarkable by galactic standards. No cybernetic enhancements, no energy shields, just flesh and bone. But something in his stance, in the cold, calculating look in his eyes, sent a chill through the delegation. They had met warriors before, but never like this. "You're the delegation, huh?" the soldier said, looking them over. The council emissary, an elder Urali, took a cautious step forward. "We have come to—" Yeah, the soldier interrupted with a smirk. "You want to talk, negotiate, figure out how to deal with us." He nodded toward the entrance. "Come on in. The commander's waiting." The council delegation hesitated. The soldier chuckled, shaking his head. "Relax. If we wanted you dead, we wouldn't be having this conversation." It was not a reassurance. It was a statement of fact. The council members swallowed their fear and stepped forward. For the first time in galactic history, The rulers of the stars had come not to dictate terms, but to beg for them. The council delegation stepped into the Terran outpost, the air thick with tension. It was a stark contrast to the grand halls of the Galactic Council chamber. No gilded architecture, no towering displays of power. Just steel walls, low-humming machinery, and the ever-present weight of something far more dangerous than mere technology. Purpose. Every human in the room, whether scientist, engineer, or soldier, moved with the same focused intensity. There was no idle chatter, no wasted motion. These were not people merely surviving in the aftermath of war. They were preparing for the next one. The delegation was led into a command center, where a single human sat waiting for them. He was older than the soldier who had greeted them, his uniform crisp, his expression unreadable. His eyes held no fear. The Urali emissary, their bioluminescent eyes flickering with unease, stepped forward. "I am Aronai, representative of the Galactic Council." The human studied them for a moment before responding. "General Elias Carter," he said simply. "No elaborate titles, no unnecessary grandeur, just a name." Aronai hesitated, then pressed on. "We have come to discuss the events that have transpired. There is much concern among the council." A ghost of a smile tugged at the corners of Carter's mouth. "Concern? That's one way to put it." He leaned back slightly. "Let me guess. You're here to decide if we're a threat." Aronai hesitated. "We are here to understand." Carter let out a slow breath. "All right," he said. "Let me make it simple for you." He tapped a console, and a holographic projection appeared. It was a timeline, centuries of war, from the earliest human conflicts to the most devastating planetary battles. Wars that had shaped entire nations, collapsed empires, and redrawn the course of history. "Our history is written in blood," Carter said. "Every species faces hardship. Every civilization struggles to survive. But humanity? We were born in war." He shifted the display to a new image, footage from the Zelrath invasion. A brutal montage of human forces tearing through the enemy, not just with weapons, but with strategy. "We learned something a long time ago," Carter continued. "You don't win wars with superior numbers. You don't win them with superior firepower." He turned his gaze to the delegation. "You win them by outthinking your enemy, by outlasting them, by becoming something they can't predict." Silence filled the room. The Drawl ambassador, his claws twitching slightly, finally spoke. "Then what is it you want, General Carter?" Carter leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "What we want," he exhaled, shaking his head. "You still don't get it, do you?" He stood up slowly, pacing around the table. "We don't want your approval. We don't need your alliances. And we sure as hell don't need your permission to exist." He stopped, locking eyes with each delegate in turn. "The question isn't what we want." His voice dropped to something low and dangerous. "It's what you want." The delegation stiffened. Carter continued, his tone calm but unwavering. "We know the council is debating what to do with us. We know some of you want war, others want containment. A few of you are smart enough to realize neither of those will work." He let the words sink in before delivering the final blow. "You want to know if humanity is a threat?" He tilted his head slightly. "That depends. Are you a threat to us?" The weight of the question settled over the delegation like a suffocating force. Aronai, despite the fear pressing against their very soul, took a slow breath. "We do not wish for war, General Carter." Carter studied them for a long moment, then nodded. "Then you won't have one." Relief rippled through the delegation, only for Carter's next words to drive home a chilling truth. "But if war does come, he said, voice steady. "It will not be like anything you've ever seen before." He leaned forward slightly. "We won't conquer. We won't occupy." He smiled. "We will end you." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. For the first time in their existence, the Galactic Council had encountered something beyond their control. Not an empire, not an invader, not a conqueror, but a force that would never be stopped, a force called humanity. 1 year later, the Galactic Council had not declared war, but they hadn't declared peace either. Instead, an unspoken Cold War had begun, one built on fear, uncertainty, and the silent understanding that Earth was now the most dangerous force in the galaxy. The Council had sent probes, attempting to monitor human activities from a safe distance. They wanted to know how quickly humanity was advancing, how much of the Zelrath's technology they had reverse-engineered. They learned nothing. Every probe sent to the Sol system simply vanished. No wreckage, no distress signals, just complete silence. And then, the disappearances started. Not on Earth, not even in the Sol system, but on the fringes of the Council's most powerful empires, entire ships, entire research stations, entire fleets, wiped from existence without a trace. The Council scrambled to uncover the truth. They dispatched their most advanced warships to investigate, believing it to be the work of a rogue faction, perhaps a remaining Zelrath remnant. They found nothing. No wreckage, no distress calls, no evidence that an enemy had even been there. And then, one day, a single derelict warship drifted into Council space. A battle-scarred cruiser from the mighty Drawl Dominion, its hull torn open as if something had ripped it apart from the inside. A distress beacon was still active. The Council intercepted it, bringing the ship into a secure orbital station for investigation. Scientists, engineers, and intelligence officers gathered, desperate for answers. They activated the ship's black box recorder. Static filled the room. Then, a single broken transmission. A voice, panicked, terrified. "They're here! We don't know how, they don't have ships, they don't have fleets, but they're here!" A deep, ragged breath. Then a whisper. "They walk in the shadows. They know where we sleep. They are hunting us." Another pause. The sound of movement, something metal scraping against the floor. A sob. "They're not an empire. They're not a nation. They are ghosts, and they are already here." A loud crash, screaming, gunfire. Then silence. The recording ended. The room was deathly quiet. Then, the monitors flickered. One by one, across the orbital station, every screen turned black before displaying the same thing. A simple message, written in flawless galactic common. "We warned you. Now we are watching." Panic gripped the Council. Humanity had never left Earth, but they had spread. No fleets, no armies, no invasions, yet they were everywhere. And for the first time, the rulers of the galaxy understood what it felt like to be prey. Fear spread like wildfire. The Galactic Council had controlled the stars for millennia, balancing power among its many empires, quelling rebellions before they could take root, deciding the fate of entire species with nothing more than a council vote. Now, they were the ones being hunted. But not by warships, not by invading legions, by something unseen. Entire planetary governors went missing overnight. High-ranking military officers vanished from the safety of their fortified stations. No alarms, no signs of struggle, no bodies, just gone. Some council species refused to believe it was humanity. How could it be? The Drawl Dominion controlled thousands of worlds. The Ralvex Imperium had the most sophisticated intelligence network in the known galaxy. The Jotl swarmed across hundreds of sectors with hive-mind coordination. Yet all of them were losing people. The disappearances weren't random. They weren't chaotic. They were calculated. The council called an emergency session. Inside the grand chamber, the air was thick with paranoia. Every species present had fortified their security, tripled their personal guards, scanned their rooms for human listening devices. It didn't help. They all knew the truth. Humanity was already inside. The Speaker of the Council, a being older than some stars, stood before the assembly. His once steady voice now wavered. "We cannot allow this to continue," he said. "Who among us has not been affected?" No one spoke, because every species in the chamber had already suffered a loss. A Droll warlord gritted his fanged teeth. "This is not warfare," he growled. "This is terror." A representative from the Ralvex Imperium, her many eyes scanning the chamber, nervously hissed, "No, this is worse than terror. Terror is chaotic. This is surgical." The Jatil ambassador, an insectoid creature with razor-sharp mandibles, chittered anxiously. "They are taking our leaders, but why? Why have they not made demands?" That was the part that frightened the council most. Humanity had made no ultimatums, no threats, no speeches. They simply acted. The speaker took a deep breath. "We must open diplomatic channels. We must—" The chamber lights flickered. Every screen inside the grand hall shut off at once. The entire chamber was plunged into silence as the massive central display came to life. A single human stood there, not a diplomat, not a general, just a man in black tactical gear. His face was calm. His voice was steady. "You don't negotiate with us." His eyes swept across the room as if he could see them directly. "You comply." A shudder ran through the assembly. The speaker, swallowing his fear, tried to respond. "We are willing to—" "No," the human cut him off. "You had your chance. Now we decide." The council chamber erupted into protest. "We are the rulers of this galaxy," the Droll warlord roared. "We do not bow to—" The human smiled. Not with arrogance, not with mockery, with certainty. And then he spoke the words that shattered the very foundation of the Galactic Council. "You don't rule anything anymore." The transmission ended. The lights returned. The screens flickered back to their original displays. But something had changed. The council members looked around, each realizing simultaneously that something was different. Half of the seats were empty. Representatives who had been there minutes ago were simply gone. No screams, no sounds, nothing. Just empty chairs. The council had lost control. Humanity had already won. Panic gripped the remaining council members. Some scrambled for their personal security teams, only to find their guards missing. Others activated emergency distress beacons, only to realize that no one was coming. It wasn't just the delegates who had disappeared. Every council-controlled communication hub, every surveillance system, every fleet coordination relay was suddenly silent. The galaxy's rulers had been severed from their own empire. The Droll warlord, once a beacon of arrogance, now trembled. What have they done?" The Speaker of the Council, his ancient skin pale with fear, forced himself to stay composed. "This is impossible," he whispered. "A species with no empire, no fleets. How did they do this?" The answer came from the shadows, a human voice echoing through the chamber's speakers. "We learned from you." A hush fell over the delegates. The screens flickered again. More humans appeared, not just soldiers, engineers, scientists, strategists, every face calm, every gaze unshaken. "You built this galaxy on control," one human said. "You believed that by keeping species in check, by suppressing threats before they could rise, you would always be in power." Another voice, a woman this time. "But you never accounted for us." The main screen shifted to show something that made the council's blood run cold. A list. Names, coordinates, classifications. It was the entire structure of the Galactic Council's leadership. Every hidden base, every classified project, every secret they thought was untouchable. A human stepped forward on the screen, smiling. You watched us for years, studied us, monitored our wars, our history, our violence. He leaned closer, his voice turning sharp. But while you were watching us, we were watching you. The silence that followed was absolute. The Droll warlord slammed his fist onto the table. Enough of this deception, he roared. We are the rightful rulers of the galaxy. We will not be intimidated by... His voice cut off. He reached for his throat, eyes wide, choking on nothing. His powerful limbs thrashed for a moment, then went still. His body collapsed onto the cold floor. Dead. The human on the screen sighed. That was a mistake. Before the council could react, the chamber doors opened, and the humans walked in, not soldiers, operatives. Their movements were precise, silent. They didn't need weapons. The fear was their weapon. One by one, the council members shrank back. Please, the Ralvex ambassador whispered, his voice trembling. We surrender. The lead human tilted his head slightly, amused. Surrender? He took a step closer, and the entire chamber flinched. This isn't a war, he said. This isn't a negotiation. His voice turned cold. This is a transition. Another human stepped forward, a woman with sharp, calculating eyes. You thought yourselves kings. She gestured at the chamber. But your empire is already gone. Your fleets no longer obey you. Your generals have vanished. Your colonies have been restructured. A cruel pause. You are nothing now. Terror filled the room. The Speaker of the Council, once the most powerful being in the known galaxy, looked around, realizing the truth. The Council had already fallen. They were just the last to know. A final message appeared on every screen in the chamber. A new decree, a new order. The Galactic Council is dissolved. The Terran administration is now in effect. And just like that, the rulers of the stars were no more. Humanity had taken the throne. The Zorth Dominion had conquered over 50 star systems without resistance. They were an empire built on superiority, their war fleets unmatched, their technology centuries ahead of any primitive species they encountered. Every world they came across either surrendered or was obliterated, until they met humans. When the first Terran distress signal was intercepted, the Zorth assumed it was another weakling race begging for mercy. A small, unimportant system at the edge of the galaxy had fallen under their control, and they had expected no real trouble from the scattered colonies there. Their fleets moved in, expecting an easy victory. But then, something unexpected happened. A single Terran warship entered the system. It was unlike anything the Zorth had ever seen. A towering behemoth of metal and fire, bristling with weapons far beyond the expected technological level of such a young species. Its hull bore scars of past battles, yet it moved with deadly precision. It did not send diplomats. It did not beg for negotiations. It did not ask for peace. It broadcasted a single message in a calm, emotionless tone. You have made a grave mistake. The Zorth fleet, numbering in the dozens, closed in on the lone warship, confident in their superiority. They laughed at the audacity of this primitive race. The battle began, and the Zorth learned fear. The Zorth commanders watched the human warship on their displays, scanning its structure for weaknesses. It was large, too large for a species they had barely acknowledged before. But its size meant nothing if it was outgunned. The Dominion had destroyed empires before. A single ship was an insult. Their fleet of 50 war cruisers and attack drones moved in, surrounding the Terran vessel from all angles. Standard protocol. overwhelm the target, hammer it with plasma fire until nothing remained. Their weapons locked on. Fire. The void exploded with energy as the Zorth unleashed their barrage. Plasma bolts, ion torpedoes, and disruptor beams raced toward the human warship, a storm of death designed to tear through planetary defenses, let alone a lone ship. Then something happened. The human warship didn't dodge. It didn't raise shields. It let the Zorth fire, and the projectiles stopped. Not all of them, but enough. Beams of light bent away, missiles detonated mid-flight, and plasma rounds fizzled out before impact. The ones that made it through struck its hull, but instead of crumpling, the ship absorbed the damage and kept moving. Aboard the Zorth flagship, Admiral Kazil's mandibles twitched in confusion. "This is impossible," one of his officers stammered. "No species can withstand a full strike from a Dominion fleet." But the human ship wasn't just surviving. It was analyzing. And then it retaliated. A single volley erupted from the Terran warship's main cannons. Not a swarm of wild, scattered fire. Not a desperate counterattack. A calculated, ruthless response. The first Zorth warcruiser vanished. No explosion, no debris. Just gone, as if something had erased it from existence. The second and third followed a second later. Then a fourth. Panic spread through the fleet. The Zorth had never seen their ships destroyed so effortlessly, so clinically. Their shields, advanced by thousands of years of research, meant nothing. Their formations, which had crushed entire armadas, were useless. Admiral Kazil's cold blood turned to ice. We are losing," an officer whispered. The human warship continued its march forward, tearing through the Zorth fleet like a predator dismantling prey. The Dominion, the unstoppable conquerors, had become the hunted. And for the first time in their history, the Zorth realized. They were not the apex predators of the galaxy. They had just woken something far worse. The silence aboard the Zorth flagship was suffocating. Admiral Kazil's mandibles clenched as he watched his fleet crumble before his eyes. One by one, his warcruisers vanished under the onslaught of the human warship's firepower. His mind, honed by decades of military strategy, failed to process what was happening. This was not how battles were fought, not against the Dominion. "Pull back," he roared. "Regroup and analyze their weapons." The remaining Zorth ships desperately shifted formations, their commanders scrambling to adjust. This was not just an engagement. It was survival. But the human warship gave them no time. Another volley erupted from its cannons. This time, the Zorth watched in horror as space itself seemed to warp around the blasts. Shields, hulls, entire ships. None of it mattered. The human weapons did not simply destroy, they erased. Kazil's second-in-command, Commander Zir, turned toward him, her eyes wide with something the Zorth never felt before. Dread. "Admiral," she whispered, "we have underestimated them." Kazil slammed his claws onto the control panel. "Impossible! Their species is young! Their technology is primitive!" "They are not primitive," Zir corrected, her voice shaking. "They have been preparing." The realization hit Kazil like a plasma bolt to the chest. This warship, this monstrosity, was not the desperate last stand of a doomed species. It was a message. The humans knew about the Dominion. They had studied them, and they had sent a single warship, not as a fight for survival, but as a warning. Kazil's claws curled inward. If a single human warship could do this, what would a fleet of them look like? "We must retreat," Zir urged. "Now." Kazil's pride screamed in defiance. The Zorth never retreated. But his survival instinct, buried under centuries of arrogance, finally won. "Send a full system retreat command," he growled. "All remaining vessels, fall back to the nearest relay point." But as the transmission was sent, The human warship did something terrifying. It let them go. The attacks stopped. The last few Zorth ships, barely holding together, limped away. No pursuit, no further destruction. Just silence. And then another transmission came through from the human vessel. This was a warning. If you return, we will not be so merciful. The message ended. The human warship simply hovered there, as if daring them to test its patience. Kazil clenched his claws, his body rigid with a strange, foreign feeling. The Zorth had faced many species, had crushed countless civilizations. Never had they been spared. Never had they been the ones warned. As the last of his fleet jumped to warp, one terrible thought burned in his mind. The Zorth Dominion had just found an enemy they couldn't conquer. And worse, they had no idea just how many more of these humans were waiting in the dark. The Zorth Dominion had never known fear. They had ruled the galaxy for millennia, their fleets carving a path of destruction through any civilization foolish enough to resist them. And yet, as Admiral Kazil sat in the shattered remains of his war room, the echoes of battle still ringing in his ears, he knew that something had changed. The human warship had done more than destroy his fleet. It had shattered the very foundation of Dominion supremacy. Reports flooded in from the surviving vessels. Scans of the Terran warship revealed technology that defied explanation. Its weapons did not merely destroy, they unmade matter, warping physics in ways the Zorth's best scientists couldn't comprehend. Its defenses had shrugged off a full-force barrage from the most advanced war fleet in the Dominion. And worst of all, it had let them go. Why? Kazil's claws dug into the metallic surface of his command console. The Zorth did not show mercy. Mercy was weakness. It was submission. Yet that single human warship had spared them, not out of kindness, but because it had no need to finish them off. It was a warning. The Zorth had always believed themselves to be the apex predators of the galaxy. Every species they encountered had fallen before them, their worlds reduced to lifeless husks, or absorbed into the ever-expanding Dominion. But the humans had just rewritten the rules. Kazil turned toward Commander Zur, who stood rigid beside him. She had been silent for most of their retreat, her mandibles clenched tight, her black eyes unreadable. Now, she spoke in a low, measured voice. "We must inform the High Council." Kazil let out a slow breath, the weight of the situation pressing against his chest. The High Council did not take failure lightly. He had lost an entire fleet against a single enemy warship. His very existence might be erased simply to prevent the spread of weakness within the Dominion. But this was larger than him, larger than his failure. "This will change everything," he muttered. Zir gave a slight nod. "If we do not act carefully, it may be the end of the Dominion itself." The word sent a ripple of unease through the command deck. The end of the Dominion? Unthinkable. And yet Kazil could not deny it. Even with their advanced technology, even with their vast numbers, the Zorth had never encountered a force like the humans. They had assumed this would be another easy conquest, an insignificant species on the fringes of the galaxy, barely worth their attention. But the humans had been watching, studying, preparing. This warship had not been an accident. It had been sent. A single vessel, powerful enough to dismantle an entire Dominion fleet, positioned in a system the Zorth had thought defenseless. How many more were there? His thoughts darkened as he considered the worst-case scenario. If humans had fleets of these warships, the Dominion's empire could be torn apart in weeks. "We must negotiate," Zir said carefully. Kazil's head snapped toward her. "You suggest submission?" "I suggest survival," she corrected. "We do not know how deep their power runs. If we attack again, and they send a fleet instead of a single warship." She didn't need to finish the sentence. The thought alone was unbearable. Kazil had never feared war. He had never doubted victory. But for the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to stand at the mercy of something far greater. Slowly, he turned toward his command console, his claws moving with reluctant precision. He accessed the Dominion's deep space relay, preparing to transmit an encrypted message to the High Council. It would be the most difficult message he had ever sent, and it would mark the first time in the history of the Zorth Dominion that they acknowledged an enemy as an equal. As he prepared the transmission, his eyes lingered on the final data scan of the human warship. Its hull still gleamed in the void, untouched by their greatest weapons, a testament to its power, a symbol of something far worse than an invading force. The humans had not come to conquer. They had come to warn them, and if the Dominion did not heed that warning, Kazil had no doubt that the next time they faced a human warship, there would be no mercy, and no escape. The High Council of the Zorth Dominion wasn't known for patience. They ruled from a station orbiting Zorvok, the Dominion homeworld, a world untouched by war, its skies clear, its cities vast. It was the heart of an empire that had never known true defeat. Until now. Admiral Kazil stood before the holographic council chamber, his mandibles tight, his claws locked behind his back. Around him, the towering forms of the Zorth High Council members flickered in holographic light, their expressions unreadable. He had just delivered his report. The room had been silent ever since. "You lost an entire fleet," one of the counselors finally said, his voice cold and measured. "To a single warship," another added, the disgust in his tone barely concealed. Kazil bowed his head slightly. "Yes." The silence stretched again. The weight of failure pressed against his exoskeleton, but he forced himself to stand tall. He was a warrior. He would not cower. One of the counselors leaned forward, his black eyes narrowing. "And you claim this human vessel allowed you to retreat?" "Yes." The counselor's mandibles twitched in thought. "Curious. If their technology is so superior, why did they not finish you?" "Because they wanted us to tell you," Kazil said. His voice was firm, but beneath it was an emotion he had never felt in a war room before. Uncertainty. It was a warning. The council chamber filled with murmurs. The Zorth Dominion did not receive warnings. They issued them. They conquered, they crushed, they did not negotiate. And yet here they were, discussing whether they had a choice. Finally, Supreme Counselor Yovak spoke, his voice like grinding stone. "You expect us to believe that a primitive species, barely worthy of recognition, has not only surpassed our technology, but also chooses not to use it to its fullest extent." "I do not expect you to believe," Kazil said. "I only tell you what I have seen." More silence. Zur, standing beside him, chose that moment to speak. "We must consider that the humans are not simply another species to be conquered. They have prepared for this moment, perhaps for centuries. We do not know how long they have been waiting for us." The thought sent a chill through the chamber. The Zorth were ancient, but what if humans had studied them before the Dominion had even acknowledged their existence? What if they had designed their warships to counter Zorth technology? "What do you suggest?" Supreme Counselor Yovak finally asked. Kazil hesitated. He knew what he had to say, knew that the words would be considered treasonous by some, but survival was more important than pride. "We must establish communication," he said. "We must speak with them, understand their motives. If we assume they are an enemy without knowing their true intent, we may doom ourselves." The chamber erupted. "Negotiation?" one counselor hissed. "You suggest bending the knee? another spat. "We should rally the full Dominion fleet and erase them before they become a true threat." Kazil remained silent, letting them argue, letting them rage. Until Zur spoke again, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "You assume we can defeat them?" The words hung in the air like a funeral dirge. The counselors went silent once more. None of them liked the thought. None of them wanted to entertain it. But none of them could deny it. Yovak's cold gaze locked onto Kazil. "Very well," he said at last. "You have fought them. You have seen their power firsthand." He leaned forward. "If you were human, and the Dominion sent an envoy, what would you do?" Kazil hesitated only a moment. Then he answered, "I would kill them all, to send a message that no peace would ever be possible." The chamber filled with quiet tension. "Then why should we expect the humans to react any differently?" Yovak pressed. Kazil exhaled slowly. "Because they already let us go. They have already proven they do not need to kill us to make their point." "And if their point is merely delayed destruction? Then we are already doomed." Yovak studied him for a long moment. Then, to Kazil's surprise, the Supreme Counselor let out a slow, rattling chuckle. "You have grown wiser, Admiral." Kazil was not sure it was a compliment. Yovak turned to the others. "We will deliberate on this. In the meantime, Admiral Kazil, you are to prepare a second fleet, not for war, but for contact. You will find the humans. You will discover their true nature." He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "And if they prove to be a threat, then we will burn their worlds before they burn ours." Kazil bowed, though unease crept into his bones. The Dominion had only ever known conquest, but he was beginning to fear that they were not the hunters in this encounter. They were the prey, and humanity had yet to show its full hand. The Zorth Dominion had always believed in overwhelming force. When diplomacy failed, they sent warships. When warships failed, they sent entire armadas. They had conquered countless species this way, never once facing an enemy that could stand against them. But the humans had shattered that belief. Admiral Kazil stood at the bridge of his new flagship, the Vorax Wrath, staring at the vast expanse of space before him. The fleet assigned to him was smaller than the one he had lost, 20 war cruisers instead of 50. The High Council had no interest in wasting resources on an unnecessary war. If negotiations failed, they would simply retreat and plan their next move. Except Kazil knew the truth. If humanity was as powerful as they suspected, there would be no second chance. "Admiral," Zur said beside him, breaking his thoughts, "we are approaching the Terran relay point." Kazil exhaled slowly. The humans had been cooperative. After their last encounter, they had not retaliated, had not followed the retreating Zorth fleet. Instead, they had sent a set of coordinates, a meeting place, deep in the void between their territories. The fact that they had allowed the Zorth to set the terms of engagement was unsettling. It suggested confidence. It suggested they knew they held the upper hand. "Activate long-range scans," Kazil ordered. The bridge fell into tense silence as data streamed in. There was only one vessel in the designated meeting point. One human warship, the same one that had obliterated half his fleet. "Why only one?" Zir muttered, her mandibles twitching. "Do they believe this is enough?" Kazil knew better. "They do not believe, Commander. They know." A communication request flashed across the bridge's interface. The humans were reaching out first. That, in itself, was another display of power. They had not waited for the Dominion to demand terms. "Accept the transmission," Kazil ordered. The main screen flickered, and a human appeared. Unlike the Zorth, whose carapace and mandibles made them look sharp and predatory, The human was soft-skinned, almost unimpressive in stature. Their species lacked natural armor, lacked claws, lacked any of the physical advantages that defined a predator race. And yet, Kazil had never felt more threatened by a single being in his entire life. The human was clad in dark gray armor, decorated with emblems Kazil did not recognize. Their eyes were piercing, calculating. Their expression was calm, almost too calm. "This is Captain Elias Ward of the Terran Federation warship Indomitable," the human said. His voice was even, controlled, but there was something underneath it, something sharp and unyielding. Kazil straightened. "I am Admiral Kazil of the Zorth Dominion. I have been ordered to establish communication between our species." Captain Ward tilted his head slightly, as if evaluating him. "So, after centuries of conquest, the Zorth finally wish to talk." Kazil did not rise to the bait. "Our previous engagement proved enlightening." A ghost of a smirk touched Ward's lips. "I imagine it did." Zir stepped forward, her tone clipped. "Our High Council wishes to know your intentions. The Dominion does not tolerate threats lightly." Ward's smirk vanished. His gaze hardened. "Then your High Council should consider its next actions very carefully," he said. The tension on the bridge thickened. The Dominion was used to being the ones issuing ultimatums. Now they were the ones receiving them. Kazil narrowed his eyes. "Are you suggesting that humanity seeks war?" Ward leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. "We are suggesting that humanity will not bow." A heavy silence followed. Kazil chose his next words carefully. "What is it that your people want?" Ward studied him for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, but the weight behind it was impossible to ignore. "We want you to understand something, Admiral. The Dominion is not invincible. You are not the apex predators you believe yourselves to be. Your conquests have been one-sided because you have never encountered a species willing to fight you on equal ground." His gaze darkened. "But we are not only willing. We are prepared." A chill ran through Kazil's exoskeleton. This was not bravado. This was not a desperate species clinging to survival. The humans were speaking as if they already knew the outcome of this conflict. Kazil could feel the eyes of his crew on him, waiting for his response. "We have no wish to escalate this conflict unnecessarily," he said carefully. Ward's expression remained unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he said, "Then you'd best ensure your High Council understands that." The transmission cut. Kazil stood there, staring at the now empty screen. His mind churned. This conversation had changed nothing. No formal agreements had been made. No peace had been secured. And yet, in his core, Kazil understood something terrible. The Dominion had never faced a true war. Not until now, and he was no longer sure if they would survive it. The bridge of the Vorax's wrath remained silent long after the transmission ended. No one spoke. No one dared to. The weight of Captain Ward's words still hung in the air like a toxin, seeping into the minds of every officer present. Zur was the first to break the silence. "They know they're stronger than us." Her voice was quiet, but there was no mistaking the edge of fear beneath it. Kazil exhaled slowly, turning to face his command crew. "Yes," he admitted. "They do." It wasn't arrogance from the humans, not an idle threat. It was a simple, terrifying truth. The Dominion had always believed themselves superior, unchallenged. Every species they encountered had either fallen or submitted. They had never met an enemy that did not fear them. And yet, here the humans stood, not just unafraid, but expecting a confrontation. "We should relay this to the High Council," one of the officers suggested, his mandibles twitching nervously. "They must decide how to proceed." Kazil's claws tapped against the console. "No," he said firmly. "Not yet." The crew turned to him, surprised. Zir's gaze sharpened. "You intend to delay?" "I intend to understand," Kazil corrected. "Something is missing here. The humans should be more aggressive. Their warship could have annihilated us again, yet they didn't. They allowed us to make contact." "Because they know they hold the advantage," an officer growled. "Perhaps," Kazil conceded. "But if they wanted war, they would have already started it. Instead, they are waiting." His mandibles clicked together thoughtfully. "That means there is something they fear." Zir frowned. "You think they fear us?" "No," Kazil admitted. "Not us. Something else." The bridge fell silent once more. It was an uncomfortable thought, but one Kazil could not ignore. The humans had every reason to push their advantage, yet they did not. That meant they were not acting from pure strength alone. There was something they were weighing, something they wanted the Dominion to realize on their own. A test. Kazil's exoskeleton tensed at the realization. "This is a game to them," he murmured. Zir's mandibles twitched. "A game. They are waiting to see how we respond," Kazil said. "If we lash out, they will strike us down like they did before. If we retreat, they will know we are weak. But if we hesitate, if we stall, if we fail to commit, then they will see us as indecisive. And that might be the worst position of all." Zir's gaze darkened. "Then what do we do?" Kazil straightened. His mind had already made its decision. "We test them back," he said. Murmurs spread through the crew, but Kazil ignored them. He turned back to the console, inputting a command. The Dominion fleet was still stationed at the edge of the relay point, ready to return to home territory and report. Instead, Kazil ordered a smaller detachment, just 3 ships, to break off and follow the human warship at a distance, not in open hostility, but in silent observation. A provocation, but not an attack. A statement, but not a declaration of war. The humans wanted to see if the Zorth understood the situation. Now, Kazil would see if they understood what it meant to be watched as well. Zir hesitated. "And if they retaliate?" Kazil's mandibles tightened. "Then we will finally have our answer." The Dominion had spent centuries assuming they were the only true force in the galaxy. Now, for the first time, they had to ask themselves a terrifying question. What if they weren't? What if humanity had also spent centuries in the shadows, watching, waiting, preparing? And what if this was not the first time they had faced an empire like the Zorth Dominion? The fleet moved. The game had begun. Kazil only hoped they were ready for what came next. The 3 Zorth war cruisers followed the human vessel at a calculated distance, their sensors locked onto its movements. It did not react. It did not break formation. It simply continued its course, as if daring them to make a move. Admiral Kazil sat rigid in his command chair, mandibles tight as he observed the long-range scans. The Indomitable, the same warship that had shattered his fleet, remained eerily silent. It had not attempted to shake off its observers. It had not deployed countermeasures. This was not normal. A species as advanced as the humans should have noticed them by now, should have responded in some way. But there was nothing. Zir stood beside him, her claws clicking against the console. "This is unsettling," she admitted. Kazil agreed. "They are aware of us. They want us to follow them." The question was, why? For hours, the pursuit continued. The human ship moved deeper into uncharted space, far beyond the territories of either species. The Zorth had expected them to head toward their home system or a fleet stronghold. Instead, they were heading into the unknown. "What is out here?" one of the officers muttered. Kazil tapped into the star charts. The system ahead had no official records, no habitable worlds, no signs of past civilization. It was a void, just empty space. "Something isn't right," he muttered. Then the human ship finally acted. A transmission request appeared on the screen. Not a standard Dominion frequency, but a direct connection to him. Kazil hesitated only a moment before accepting it. The screen flickered to life, revealing Captain Elias Ward once again. He looked no different from before. Calm, unreadable, dangerous. "You've followed us far enough, Admiral," Ward said. "I think it's time we talked." Kazil leaned forward. "Then speak." Ward nodded slightly. "I see you're starting to ask the right questions. Why didn't we attack? Why haven't we pushed further into Dominion space? And most importantly, why are we leading you out here?" Kazil remained silent. He would not give the human the satisfaction of seeing his uncertainty. Ward's expression darkened. "You think the Dominion is the apex power in this galaxy. You think your fleet is unmatched, your technology supreme. But tell me, Admiral, do you even know what lies beyond your own borders?" Kazil's mandibles twitched. "Explain." Ward exhaled, as if weighing his words carefully. Then he gestured to the space around them. "You've spent centuries conquering the weak," he said. "You expand, you subjugate, you believe yourselves invincible. But you've only ever fought enemies smaller than you. You've never faced an empire your equal, or worse, one stronger than you." Kazil felt something cold settle in his gut. Ward continued. "The reason we let you go after our first encounter wasn't just to show you our strength. It was because we needed you to understand something." His gaze sharpened. "You are not the greatest threat in this galaxy, and you are about to find out why." Before Kazil could respond, the Indomitable sent out a pulse, a massive energy burst that rippled across the system. The Zorth warcruisers immediately detected it. Their sensors flared with activity. The void ahead of them shifted. And then, something answered. The darkness of space twisted. A tear in reality itself opened, massive and unnatural. From within, a shape emerged. It was a warship. No, something beyond a warship. A vessel unlike anything Kazil had ever seen, dwarfing even the Indomitable in size. Its hull was a jagged, twisted mass of dark metal, pulsating with eerie blue energy. Its weapons began to charge. Kazil's blood turned to ice. Ward's voice came through once more, quiet and grim. "You've spent centuries thinking you were the hunters, Admiral." His eyes locked onto Kazil's. "Welcome to the real galaxy." And then the unknown vessel fired. The blast from the unknown warship tore through space like a rift in reality itself. Kazil barely had time to react before the energy wave slammed into his fleet. One of the 3 Zorth warcruisers vanished instantly, its hull disintegrating into nothingness. No explosion, no wreckage, just gone. The second ship veered off course, its shields collapsing under an invisible force. Sparks flared across its surface as its power systems overloaded, leaving it crippled and adrift. "Hard, evasive maneuvers," Kazil barked. The Vorak's wrath shifted, engines burning at full thrust as it attempted to reposition. Kazil's claws dug into the armrests of his command chair as alarms blared across the bridge. "This is impossible," one of his officers cried. "We detected nothing before the attack." Kazil's mind raced. The unknown warship had not fired a traditional energy weapon. There had been no plasma bolts, no torpedoes, no railgun slugs. Whatever it had used, it bypassed conventional defenses entirely. Zur's voice was sharp with urgency. "Admiral, we must retreat!" Kazil hated the word, but for the second time in his life, he knew there was no choice. "All remaining ships, fall back!" The surviving war cruiser complied, its thrusters flaring as it limped away. The Vorek's wrath followed, banking hard as the unknown vessel shifted its aim. But before it could fire again, another energy pulse rippled through space. Not from the alien warship, from the Indomitable. The human vessel released a burst of concentrated gravimetric energy, distorting the space around them. The unknown warship faltered, as if momentarily disrupted by the pulse. Its weapons dimmed, the eerie blue glow flickering. Kazil's heart pounded. The humans knew about this enemy. They had fought them before. Captain Ward's voice cut through the comms, cold and precise. "Get your ships out of here, Admiral. We'll hold them off." Kazil's mandibles tightened. A part of him wanted to stay, to analyze, to understand. But another part, the part that had faced the human warship and lived, knew better. He had pushed too far. He had followed the humans, believing himself the observer. But in reality, he had been led, not into a trap, but into a lesson, one the humans had already learned long ago. "Initiate jump sequence," Kazil ordered. The bridge crew obeyed, their movements tense and hurried. The Vorak's Wrath's engines roared as the jump drive engaged. Just before the jump sequence completed, Kazil caught one final glimpse of the battle. The Indomitable was no longer just observing, it was attacking, but not recklessly. It moved with practiced precision, launching weapons that seemed designed specifically to counter the unknown warship. Each strike disrupted its energy patterns, destabilizing its shields in ways Kazil didn't understand. The humans weren't just fighting this enemy, they had been studying it. And then, in a flash of light, the Dominion fleet jumped away. The return to Zorth space was met with silence. No victory, no triumph, only unanswered questions. Kazil stood before the High Council once more, but this time, he wasn't here to argue for war or superiority. He was here to warn them. "You believe the Dominion is the greatest force in the galaxy," Kazil said, his voice steady but heavy. "But we are not. We have never been." The counselors shifted uneasily. Zur stood beside him, her gaze hard. "We encountered an enemy unlike any we have ever seen. It destroyed our ships with ease. And the humans, they knew." The Supreme Counselor narrowed his eyes. "Knew what?" Kazil exhaled. "That there are worse things out there than the Dominion." Silence. The High Council had ruled for centuries under the belief that they were unchallenged, that they were the apex of all things. And now, that belief was crumbling. One of the counselors finally spoke, voice sharp. "Then what do you propose, Admiral?" Kazil lifted his head. "We need to understand the humans, not as enemies, not as prey, but as survivors." His voice darkened. "Because if they have been fighting this enemy long before we arrived, then we need them more than they need us." A heavy pause. The High Council did not speak immediately. They never sought alliances. But this time, Kazil saw something new in their expressions. Uncertainty. The Dominion had always looked at the stars with hunger, but now, for the first time, they looked with fear. And in the depths of the void, something watched, something ancient, something worse. Humanity had not been preparing for war against the Zorth Dominion. They had been preparing for something far, far deadlier. And now the Dominion had no choice but to prepare, too, or be the next to vanish. The High Council chamber remained deathly silent. The weight of Kazil's words pressed down on them, suffocating the arrogance that had ruled the Zorth Dominion for millennia. They had believed themselves invincible. They had believed the galaxy was theirs to take. But the humans had shattered that illusion, and now something far worse lurked in the dark. Supreme Counselor Yovak's mandibles twitched as he finally spoke. You expect us to trust the humans? Kazil exhaled. I expect you to recognize reality, Counselor. We have been blind to the dangers beyond our empire. Humanity has not just survived this war, we do not even know how long they have fought it. His gaze hardened. We cannot afford to be their enemy, not when something far greater is at our doorstep. Another counselor scoffed. And if the humans are merely waiting for the right moment to strike us down instead? Kazil's mandibles clicked. Then we die either way. Silence. The truth hung between them like a blade. The Zorth Dominion had spent centuries believing war was simple, either conquer or be conquered. But this was something beyond war. This was survival. Zir took a step forward, her voice firm. We must establish diplomatic contact, not from a place of strength, but from understanding. If we continue to act as if we are the apex predators, we will not just fall to the humans, we will be consumed by whatever lurks beyond them. The words sent a chill through the chamber. For the first time in Dominion history, they were no longer the threat. They were the threatened. Supreme Counselor Yovak leaned back, his cold eyes locked on Kazil. If we do this, if we attempt diplomacy, you realize there is no turning back. Kazil nodded. I do. Another pause. Then, finally, Yovak exhaled. Very well, he said. Proceed with contact. Kazil inclined his head. It was not submission. It was not surrender. It was survival. As he turned to leave, he sent one final transmission to the Indomitable. We understand now. The response came seconds later. Good. Then maybe, just maybe, you'll live long enough to see what's really coming. And in the depths of space, beyond human and Zorth territory, something ancient stirred. Something that neither species could fight alone. The war had never been between the Dominion and humanity. The real war had yet to begin.